Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we bring you thought-provoking narratives that explore the depths of human emotion and the complexities of relationships. Today, we dive into a powerful tale of betrayal, redemption, and community transformation, a story of love tested by secrets, and the journey to heal and rebuild. Join us as we unravel the story of Nicole, James, and the truth that sets them free. The sky was a tapestry of heavy gray clouds, mirroring the somber mood that enveloped Maplewood on that bleak afternoon. Friends, family, and neighbors had gathered at Greenwood Memorial Church to bid farewell to Emily Johnson, a beloved member of the community whose sudden passing had left a void in their hearts. The church, usually a place of solace and reflection, was today a sanctuary of shared grief and cherished memories. As the service commenced, Father Michael Reynolds stood at the altar, his usually steady voice wavering slightly as he recounted Emily's unwavering kindness and her unwavering dedication to those around her. The congregation listened intently, each person lost in their own memories, some holding back tears while others allowed their emotions to flow freely. Children sat quietly beside their parents, their innocent eyes wide with confusion and sadness, struggling to comprehend the finality of loss. Amidst the prayers and eulogies, an unexpected sound pierced the solemnity, a loud, persistent barking that echoed unsettlingly through the hallowed halls. All eyes turned towards the casket, where Max, Emily's loyal German shepherd, stood unwaveringly. His fur bristled, and his eyes were fixed intensely on the closed casket, his body taut with agitation. The serene silence shattered instantly, replaced by a mixture of surprise and unease among the attendees. "What's wrong with him?" whispered a young woman, her voice trembling as she glanced around for answers. Others exchanged worried glances, some attempting to soothe Max, who seemed determined to communicate something beyond the visible. Father Reynolds approached the dog with a gentle hand, kneeling beside him in an effort to calm his distressed companion. "Max, it's okay, boy," he murmured softly, stroking the dog's head in a soothing gesture. But Max's barking only grew louder, his gaze never wavering from the casket. The congregation watched in growing confusion, their grief now intermingled with curiosity and concern. A few attendees began to discreetly pull out their phones, capturing the unusual interruption, while others remained rooted in place, unsure of how to respond. Amidst the mounting tension, a man stepped forward from the crowd. David Carter, a newcomer to Maplewood with an enigmatic presence, moved towards the casket with deliberate calmness. Tall and composed, his keen eyes took in every detail of the scene, from Max's unwavering stance to Father Reynolds's nervous demeanor. "Excuse me," he called out softly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Can someone explain why Father Reynolds seems so uneasy?" Father Reynolds hesitated, his hand still resting on Max's head, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. But David's persistent gaze and the unwavering attention of the crowd signaled that this was no ordinary disturbance. David crouched beside Max, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the priest's evident discomfort. "Max seems to be trying to tell us something," he observed thoughtfully, his eyes meeting those of the dog. "Perhaps Emily left us a message we're not aware of." The congregation fell silent, the only sounds being Max's intermittent barks and the distant hum of traffic outside. Father Reynolds, visibly shaken, tried to dismiss the incident, but the air was thick with unspoken questions and a growing sense of mystery. David's presence and his intuitive understanding of the dog's behavior sparked a flicker of hope that perhaps there was more to Emily's passing than met the eye. As the service continued, the incident lingered in the minds of those present, intertwining their grief with a newfound curiosity. David stood back, his thoughts racing as he pondered the significance of Max's disturbance. Little did he know, this moment of unexpected interruption was the beginning of a journey that would unravel deep-seated secrets and test the very fabric of their tight-knit community. As the initial shock of Max's incessant barking began to wane, an uneasy silence settled over the congregation at Greenwood Memorial Church. Emily Johnson's funeral had already been a poignant farewell, but the unexpected interruption by her loyal German shepherd had introduced a layer of mystery that no one could ignore. Faces that had been etched with sorrow now bore expressions of confusion and concern, eyes darting between Max and the casket in search of answers. Father Michael Reynolds, usually a pillar of composure, found himself visibly unsettled. His hands, which had gracefully gestured during the eulogy, now fidgeted nervously as he attempted to address the congregation. "Perhaps Max is simply grieving," he suggested weakly, his voice betraying his own discomfort. But his words felt hollow, failing to quell the growing unease among those present. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Is something wrong with him?" a young woman asked her friend, her voice tinged with worry. Others exchanged puzzled glances, some taking tentative steps toward Max in an effort to soothe him, while others remained rooted in place, unsure of how to interpret the dog's behavior. The priest's inability to provide a clear explanation only fueled the mounting suspicion. Amidst the murmurs, a tall figure emerged from the back of the church, drawing curious glances from those around him. David Carter, a recent arrival to Maplewood, had quietly observed the unfolding situation from the sidelines. With his keen eyes and thoughtful demeanor, David possessed an innate ability to read between the lines, a trait that made him both a respected figure and a subject of intrigue in the small town. His presence was almost serendipitous, as if he had been waiting for this very moment to step forward. David approached the congregation with measured steps, his gaze fixed on Max. There was a quiet confidence about him, a sense of purpose that set him apart from the grieving attendees. "Excuse me," he began softly, drawing the attention of those nearby. "Can someone explain why Father Reynolds seems so uneasy today?" Father Reynolds looked up, his eyes meeting David's with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "I'm not sure what you mean," he stammered, attempting to regain control of the situation. But David's persistent gaze suggested that he had sensed something deeper, something that went beyond the surface-level grief. Undeterred, David knelt beside Max, extending a hand in a gesture of calm. "Max seems to be trying to tell us something," he observed thoughtfully, his voice steady and reassuring. "Perhaps Emily left us a message we're not aware of." The congregation fell silent, the only sounds now being Max's intermittent barks and the distant hum of traffic outside the church. Father Reynolds took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. "Max has always been a perceptive dog," he said cautiously. "Maybe he senses something we don't." David nodded, his eyes never leaving Max's intense stare. Dogs have an incredible ability to sense emotions and even uncover truths that humans might overlook. "Maybe there's more to Emily's passing than we initially thought." The priest glanced around, noticing the mix of skepticism and curiosity on the faces of the attendees. "I assure you, Emily passed peacefully," Father Reynolds insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "She was surrounded by loved ones until the very end." But David remained unconvinced. Sometimes, the most obvious explanations don't tell the whole story. If Max is acting this way, there might be something worth investigating. A murmur of agreement began to spread through the crowd, as more people started to wonder if there was indeed a deeper mystery to unravel. Father Reynolds, sensing the shifting dynamics, attempted once more to steer the focus back to the ceremony. "Let us remember why we are here today and honor Emily's memory with our prayers and thoughts." However, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. David stood up, his resolve evident. "I think it would be worthwhile to look into this further," he declared, earning a few nods from the more open-minded attendees. "Perhaps there are unanswered questions that need addressing." As the service continued, the presence of David Carter lingered in the minds of those present. His calm, yet determined demeanor had ignited a spark of curiosity and skepticism that challenged the previously unquestioned narrative of Emily's peaceful passing. The rest of the funeral proceeded with a mixture of solemnity and contemplation. The attendees, now torn between their grief and the unsettling possibility that something had been overlooked. As I watched David engage with the congregation and Max, I felt a growing sense of anticipation. The quiet town of Maplewood was about to uncover layers of secrets that had long been buried. And David Carter, with his unwavering determination, was poised to lead the charge. The journey to uncover the truth behind Emily's death had only just begun, and the lessons of empathy, perseverance, and the courage to question were about to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. I knew things couldn't go on like this. The silence between James and me had become deafening, and I could feel the distance spreading further with every passing day. We weren't talking. We weren't even trying. It was as though we were two people living under the same roof, but not in the same world. But what hurt most was the feeling that I had been replaced. That Sarah, his first love, had somehow become the woman he longed for. And me? I was just the convenient wife. The one who had everything in the eyes of the world, but nothing that mattered to him anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know if this was a fleeting moment, a temporary lapse, or if there was something more permanent about this rupture in our marriage. But James had closed himself off. He had become distant in a way that I hadn't thought possible for someone who had once shared so much of himself with me. And then, the moment I feared, the one I had been trying to avoid, finally came. James left the house one night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being abandoned, left behind for someone else. I had seen the way he looked at her. I had heard the way he spoke of her, the subtle admiration laced in every word. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to confront him. I had spent hours that night pacing the floor. My mind a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, heartbreak, but mostly the relentless need for the truth. I wasn't going to stand by and pretend anymore. I had been strong for so long, burying my fears under layers of composure. But now, I was breaking. And it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fear that I was losing the man I loved, the man I thought I knew. When James came home, late as usual, I confronted him. The words came out like fire, searing through the air between us. You think I don't see it? James? You think I don't feel what's happening? I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. You've been distant. You've been cold. And all I see when I look at you is her. I see the way you look at Sarah, and I can't ignore it anymore. He froze. The guilt was written all over his face. Though he didn't say anything at first, his silence made it worse, an accusation in itself. You were never supposed to know, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper, as though he regretted the confession already. But yes, I've been seeing Sarah for a while now. His words hit me like a slap. But the worst part? He was telling me the truth. There was no denying it. He had been seeing her, not just as an old friend, but as someone he still loved, someone he had never fully let go of. I could feel my heart crumbling. But there was more. I needed to understand why. I needed to know how this had happened. How had we gone from being so close to this? Why? James? After everything we've been through together, after the years of love and trust, how could you do this to me? I whispered, my voice breaking. He took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to the floor. I don't know. Nicole, I don't have an answer for that. I never intended for it to go this far. But when Sarah came back into my life, it was like a part of me I had buried for so long was awakened. I thought I could keep it contained, but I couldn't. I stared at him, numb. The man I had married, the man I had loved, was not the man standing before me now. This was a stranger, a man who had allowed the cracks in our marriage to widen until they swallowed us whole. But there was still something else, something he hadn't told me yet, something I could feel in the air between us. Is there more? I asked softly, almost afraid to hear it. James hesitated, his lips pressed tight. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. I've been seeing someone else for the past few months. I'm sorry. Nicole, it was supposed to be just an affair, but I think I've fallen in love with her. The words hit me like a tidal wave. I had known it in my gut, but hearing it out loud, hearing him admit it, was like watching the foundation of my life crumble beneath me. But then he said something that shook me to my core, something I never expected. There's more. I've been paying off Father Leo, the priest who married us. For months now, he's been counseling me, telling me what to do, advising me on how to fix things with Sarah. And, Nicole, he's been more involved in this than you know. Father Leo, the man who had guided us through our wedding, the man who had supported us through our darkest times. How could this be happening? You've been seeing a priest? You've been talking to Father Leo about this? I asked, my voice a mix of disbelief and betrayal. James nodded. He's been helping me navigate this, helping me understand my feelings. I thought if I could talk to him, I could figure out what I really wanted. But the truth is, he's been making things worse. He's not been counseling me. Nicole, he's been manipulating me. He's been telling me to follow my heart, no matter the consequences. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Father Leo, the man we had trusted, the man who had helped us make promises to each other, had been playing a dangerous game all along. He had known about James's feelings for Sarah and had been feeding those feelings, nurturing them, even at the expense of our marriage. I felt sick, betrayed not only by James, but by the very person who had stood in front of us and blessed our union. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't seen before. This wasn't just about James and Sarah. This was about manipulation, deceit, and the way people, even those closest to us, could shape our lives for their own gain. I wasn't going to let this continue. Not anymore. The next few days after the confrontation were a blur. Moments of heated silence, furtive glances, and a constant knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. James had gone silent, his presence in the house becoming more like a shadow than a husband. And me? I was numb, grappling with the devastation of everything I thought I knew, unraveling faster than I could tie the threads back together. But I knew one thing for sure. I needed answers, not just about James's betrayal, but about Father Leo's involvement. This went deeper than an affair. It was a conspiracy, a web of lies and manipulation that I couldn't untangle alone. That's when I decided to reach out to David and Max. David, a childhood friend of James's and a lawyer I had known for years, was always level-headed, meticulous, and fiercely loyal. Max's assistant and a former investigative journalist had a knack for digging into the darkest corners of any situation and uncovering the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Together, they made an unstoppable team, and I needed their help more than ever. It was David who answered first. I'd been pacing back and forth in the living room when I saw his name flash across my phone screen. The tension that had gripped me for days seemed to loosen just a little. Knowing he'd finally reached out, I needed his voice, his calm perspective. "Nikki, what's going on?" he asked, his tone serious but warm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions before speaking. "It's James and Father Leo. I don't know how much you've heard, but it's worse than I thought. James is having an affair, and Father Leo's been involved, giving him advice, pushing him towards Sarah. I need to know everything about Leo." "David, everything." There was a pause. Then David spoke again. "I've been hearing things about Leo lately. Not from James, but from some people in the church. He's been acting strange, distant even. I think you're right. There's more to him than you realize." "Then you'll help?" I asked, my voice desperate. "Of course," David replied firmly. "Max and I'll get to the bottom of this. Don't worry. We'll take care of it." The investigation began immediately. David and Max didn't waste time. Max, with his old connections in the media world, was the first to get results. Within a day, he had unearthed some troubling details about Father Leo's recent activities. It turned out that Father Leo had been involved in several suspicious financial transactions, ones that went beyond mere donations. There were reports of large sums of money being moved between accounts with no clear explanation, some of which traced back to entities that were eerily linked to Sarah's family. It didn't take much to connect the dots. Sarah, with her old money background and connections to powerful figures, was not only tied to James's emotional entanglements, but possibly to the dark dealings Father Leo had become embroiled in. Max didn't stop there. He dug into Leo's personal history, digging up rumors that painted a picture of a man who had always been a little too ambitious, a little too eager to climb the ladder of power. There were whispers of relationships with high-profile benefactors, and not just in the spiritual sense. There were deals being made under the guise of charity, favors given in exchange for influence, and favors returned with interest. But the most damning discovery? A file of emails between Father Leo and an unknown party that suggested blackmail. In these messages, Leo was heard to mention a personal transaction he had with Sarah, something that could be used to manipulate James if necessary. Whatever he had promised her, whatever deal had been struck, it was clear that Leo had been involved far more deeply than I could have ever imagined. By the time I met with David and Max the following week, I was both shaken and resolute. David sat across from me at the cafe, Max beside him, both looking at me as if they had already read the full extent of the situation in my eyes. "Nicole," David said softly, "we've found something that could change everything." I felt my heart drop in my chest, but I held steady. "What is it?" Max slid a folder across the table, his fingers tracing the edge as if he was reluctant to reveal the contents. "These," he said, "are emails between Father Leo and a third party. It's not just about Sarah. Nicole, Leo's been blackmailing James. He's been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating everything." I flipped open the folder, my hands trembling slightly. The first email was dated just days before James had confessed to me about the affair. It was from Father Leo to a mysterious contact, urging them to keep the pressure on and to let James feel the weight of his own decisions. Leo had been plotting from the very beginning, using Sarah as his pawn and pushing James toward her. But it wasn't just manipulation, it was blackmail. The email revealed that Leo had threatened to expose a deep secret from James's past, one that could have destroyed his career and family legacy. He had known about it all along, and that was how he had been controlling him. I slammed the folder shut, my breath coming fast. This wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. James had been cornered, played like a puppet in Leo's twisted game. And Sarah, with her endless charm and allure, had been the perfect distraction. She was the bait Leo had used to lure James deeper into his web of control. "We need to confront Leo," I said, my voice low and steady, despite the anger and shock that boiled inside me. "We need to make sure he pays for what he's done." David nodded. "We will, but we need to be careful. Nicole, this goes deeper than you think." I stood up, my resolve hardening. "No, we're not letting him get away with this." Max looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You're not alone in this. Nicole, we'll see it through." And just like that, the three of us, David, Max, and me, became an unbreakable force, intent on uncovering the truth and bringing Father Leo's manipulation to light. We were going to take him down. The days following the investigation were the longest of my life, each moment heavy with the weight of knowing that everything I'd built, my marriage, my trust in the man I loved, my place in this high society, was nothing more than a facade. But I also knew that this painful truth was the only way forward. There was no going back to a world built on lies. James had been caught in a web of manipulation. Father Leo had played his part. And now, it was time for the reckoning. The confrontation with Father Leo was set for a cold, early afternoon, in the very church where I had once felt so much peace. It felt almost symbolic, a place of worship turned battlefield. When we arrived, the place was eerily quiet. The stained glass windows filtered the dim light into colorful patches across the stone floor. But it did little to ease the sense of impending doom. David and Max flanked me as we stepped into the sacristy. Father Leo stood by the altar, his back to us, as though he were preparing for a sermon. The sight of him, once a comforting figure in my life, now sent a chill down my spine. This man, who I had trusted, who had guided James through difficult times, was nothing more than a manipulator, a puppet master pulling strings from the shadows. The revelation hit me hard every time I saw him. "Father," I called, my voice steady. "We need to talk." He turned slowly, a tight smile on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nicole, I didn't expect you here, and certainly not with company," he said, eyeing David and Max, who stood at the ready. Each of them braced for the confrontation to come. "You've been lying to me," I said, my voice low but cutting. "You've been lying to James, manipulating him, and using him to control not just his life, but his family's legacy. And now you've dragged us all into this web of deceit. Why, Father? Why?" He took a step toward me, his hands clasped in front of him as though he were still playing the role of the priest, still trying to hold on to some semblance of power. "Nicole," he said in that same calm, patronizing tone, "you misunderstand. Everything I've done, I did for the greater good. Sometimes one must bend the rules to uphold something far greater." James wasn't capable of seeing that. He needed guidance. Max stepped forward, his voice sharp and cutting. "Guidance? You've been blackmailing him, Leo, using his past to control him, forcing him into a relationship that was never real. And you've been doing it for your own gain." Father Leo's expression flickered. Just for a moment, he didn't flinch, but the mask cracked. "You think I did it for myself?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly, as if he was finally revealing the truth he'd been hiding. "This was never about me. It was about what I had to do to protect everything, to protect the church, the community, the things you don't understand. Your husband, he had a role to play. He was part of something bigger, something more important." I could feel the anger rising within me. Every word he said seemed to drip with self-righteousness, as if he believed his actions were justified because they were done in the name of a cause he claimed to be larger than any individual. But I could see through the mask now. It was never about a greater good. It was about control, power, and manipulation. "No, Father," I said, stepping closer to him. "You've been using people as pawns in your game, and it's time for it to end. The truth is out now, and there's no going back. You will be held accountable for everything you've done." There was a brief silence, and then Father Leo finally dropped his facade. His eyes, once filled with cold confidence, now held something darker. Fear, perhaps, or guilt, but it was too late for that now. The truth was out, and it couldn't be erased. David stepped forward, his voice steady but forceful. "Father Leo, your involvement in these schemes will not be ignored. We're taking this to the authorities. You'll have to answer for your actions, and your time in this community is over." It felt like a weight had been lifted as Father Leo's bravado crumbled. The once powerful priest, who had so often hidden behind his collar and his position in the community, now stood exposed. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable, no longer the puppet master, but a man backed into a corner by the very web he had woven. As we walked out of the church, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The storm had passed, and with it, the years of secrecy, deception, and manipulation that had threatened to tear my life apart. Father Leo was gone from our lives, his power shattered, and his lies no longer had a hold over us. But what about James? Would this bring us back together? That was the next question, the one I hadn't yet found the answer to. A few days later, James and I met in the place where it all began, our home. The place that had been both a sanctuary and a battlefield. He looked different, worn down by the truth of everything that had come to light, but also free. Free from Father Leo's control. Free from the weight of his guilt. "I never thought I'd find myself here," James said quietly, sitting down across from me in the living room, his hands resting on his knees as he gazed at the floor. "I didn't want any of this. Nicole, I never wanted to hurt you. I was just trying to protect us, to protect everything we've built. But I've realized I can't keep running. I can't keep hiding behind lies." I took a deep breath, fighting back the rush of emotions that threatened to overtake me. "And you don't have to. James, we're not alone in this anymore. I'm not alone. We have the truth now, and that's what matters." His eyes met mine, filled with regret, but also something more. Hope. "I want to make this right. I want to be the man you deserve. I want to be the husband you once knew." I nodded slowly. "It's going to take time, and we can't undo what's been done. But we can rebuild. Together." It wasn't easy. Healing never is. But it was a start. A beginning. In the months that followed, The ripple effects of our confrontation with Father Leo spread throughout the community. The church, once a pillar of power in our town, began a long process of reevaluation, seeking transparency, accountability, and healing. The people who had once turned a blind eye to Father Leo's actions began to question the very systems that allowed such manipulation to thrive. For me, this period was transformative. The pain of betrayal slowly gave way to a deeper understanding of what true strength was. Not in the power to control, but in the courage to confront the truth. No matter how difficult, I realized that transformation wasn't just about the community or about James and me. It was about all of us, individually, becoming better versions of ourselves, breaking free from the past, learning from our mistakes, and embracing the possibility of something better, even in the face of hardship. In the end, the community didn't just recover, it grew stronger. And as for James and me, we weren't the same people we had been when we first met. We were something new, something more solid, and we were ready to face whatever came next together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. We hope the story of Nicole, James, and their community's transformation resonated with you and reminded us all of the power of truth and empathy in healing. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, take care. And remember, the most profound stories often come from the heart.